Well, hello there, and welcome to the first ever episode of Cyber Voices, the official podcast of the Australian Information Security Association, but you might know us as AISA. I'm your host, David Willett, and it is my pleasure to have you with us as we explore the diverse voices of the Australian cyber industry. For this first episode, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Dovid Clarke from the Victorian government. Dovid and I unpacked both of our cyber careers and the importance of building a diverse talent pipeline within the Australian cyber industry. Also, I was able to have a chat with Emily Wingard, who is the chair of the South Australian AISA branch, and heard all about the recent and very successful Adelaide SEC and what else is coming up for our South Australian members. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Cyber Voices. Dovid, welcome. Cyber Voices, our first ever guest. No pressure at all.
I am smiling, I confess, given we're going audio.
And look, and for those who are not familiar with Dovid, so for the Department of Government Services, you are the Victorian Government Chief Information Security Officer and Executive Director for Data and Digital Resilience.
They couldn't give a longer title.
No, and I wonder, is there even a way to acronym that, or do people try?
We tried to put a T in the division name, CSDDRD, to make it custard. Yeah, but there was a rebellion from the data team, so unfortunately, keeping it CSDDRD. We're happy that we're in the age of electronic business cards and not paper ones.
Yes,
because that may need to be bigger than the traditional size.
Yeah, and it's kind of becoming common. I think there's in a former role of mine, I had CISO, but then I added other things like tech risk and workplace technology, and it was CISO raw rat or something like that.
I think where this one's interesting is having picked up the normal portfolios like tech risk or a bit of audit or that continuity space, picked up a bit of data, and the statutory roles around chief data officer, which is a stretch, and resilience around digital, so telco, and potentially out of the more recent large-scale computer outage, some roles in that we're trying to bat away. But yeah, there's certainly a breadth of role across Victorian government that's a continual growth opportunity.
You can certainly see how the jigsaw all fits into place, because you could probably argue a lot of those additional items on your title are part of a CISO's responsibility, or at least offshoots of it.
I think offshoots. I think it's around how you build the right team, and we've worked on that, and we're just about at the point, and we've got one more hire to come, a really talented CISO from private sector. We're excited when they accept the offer shortly, and that will round out that leadership team. But I agree. I think the skills are transferable. And I think we did a cyber showcase for public sector networks straight after that large disruption event. And my keynote was talking about how we as cyber and incident people, we have transferable skills, and our ability to work together regardless of the subject matter stood us in good stead. And I think those things kind of resonate.
To that point, we're not really stuck to any particular industry. I think that's one of the beautiful things about our roles. I know personally I've worked across government, financial services, higher education, and you always have an amazing opportunity to learn if you want to. And you've got a really interesting background. So you've spent time in the Army, you've spent time working for John Holland Group and Sydney Airport as well.
And mining,
yeah. just the easy stuff, right?
The fun stuff. I mean, I love a role where you can see the outcome. You can see what you're safeguarding. You can look out the window and see the airport running. You can go to a mine site and see the massive machinery operating and realizing what disruption costs and they're linked to business outcomes. So they're things that make it easy to get up and trudge through another day.
Yeah, and I think it's important for cyber people to be able to make that important link. Do you actually feel the importance of what it is you're protecting?
I mean, I look at your last role and your current one. It's a direct line with you nailing your job and the outcomes that come out the other end. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think knowing that you're making a massive difference, like in your example of the airport, how critical that functionality is, having that infrastructure in place and that operating is to Australia and the economy and just people's lives.
We talked a bit before we came on air about how do you have that effective conversation with execs and boards and stuff and being able to draw that line. Or I used to point out the window at the airport and go, well, this is what we're here to look after. And everyone would nod sagely.
Yeah.
Because you're linking to things way beyond our bubble.
How did your career in cyber really sort of start to form then? Like, so starting, as an officer in the Australian Army, and, how long were you in the Army for, and where did it start? When did cyber sort of start to creep its way into what you were doing?
I think it's a fair question, because when I look back now, the genesis was in the Army. So I was an intelligence officer. We make the joke that you wait to get that issued, and I never got it issued. So nobody gave me any intelligence. So we're still working on that. But when I got into my technical strength, it was around signals intelligence. So working in electronic warfare, and then working in Canberra with what is now ASD, then it was DSD. That probably gave me some of the foundations that when I came into the private sector much later, after traversing physical and realizing the limitations of that, going back to school and seeing the natural technical bent that linked between SIGINT to what is now cyber. I think we see that play out in Canberra. If you look at what Abby's been able to build in the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, congrats on her promotion recently, and that the link back to ASD, but they are different sides of a coin, but they're common threads. So it's been almost a mini homecoming for me over time. But then coming into it was really getting an opportunity in a mining company, coming in as a first hire and a chance to build something which they didn't really understand, and doing the foundations of risk management and the business impact, and then building from there, and having some great leaders I could learn from, and let me fail a few times, which of course happens. And then that chance to work at Sydney Airport, critical infrastructure, largest airport in Australia, the largest corporate cash deal of 20 odd billion that happened while we were there, and then exposure to GIP and those large hedge funds was instrumental and pretty inspiring too, to be part of that. Sydney Airport was 21 through 23 and a half. Yeah.
Wow, it must have been massive.
It was, but it was so focused. I mean, Sydney Airport's 650 people, but there could be 40,000 people through the tenancy on a given day.
Yeah.
And a whole ton of them working there and understanding that 500 comms rooms, kilometres of fibre, just amazing place.
No. Slightly different, but I worked there when I was like 19 years old in a cafe, so I'm certainly familiar with how many people go through there on a daily basis.
The only bad news, I'm not sure the coffee has improved since you were there, so it's good to be back in Melbourne.
It was a particular big chain. I will not mention their name though. What kind of took you from Sydney Airport to wanting to move into the government space with the Victorian government?
So I'd been commuting from Melbourne every week up to Sydney. My family are based here.
So you're based here.
My wife is based here. My two kids go to primary school here. Fantastic little primary school, a little public primary school. Spruik the government while we can. And, I found a role here and I was really enjoying it, but it was like, if that's my last CISO gig, is there enough to get your teeth in? I made the mistake of telling people I was probably a little bit bored. And I had a coffee with the hiring manager here, who's a really experienced government bureaucrat. I was just a bit inspired. So then I applied for the role, and surprisingly they offered it to me, and I thought, okay, we'll give this a go. And then the more I got sucked into it, the more you're like, I seem to be running on the ragged edge, but what we're doing for community and what we're trying to do and a chance to bring that experience in was too good to turn down.
Yeah. And there's a lot of talk at the moment about like what's the shelf life of a CISO? Because it's a role that people do burn out in, because there is a real particular skill set that it's almost like this secret sauce that you've either got it or you don't in some cases. I personally think you can learn it as long as you've got the right experience and the right mindset and you're in it for the right reasons, which is a lot of what you're talking about, right? You're in it because you've got an important role in terms of protecting some business, service, a community. Now, that could be something as small as a local government or a small business group of small businesses, whatever it is, all the way to one of the largest airports in the country. And that's what goes back to what we were saying before, right? If you're approaching a point where you can't really learn anything else, and you've achieved what you set out to achieve, and it can go on to bigger and better things without you, which is kind of what happened to me in my previous role. Everyone was like, but Dave, you've been there for so long and you built that team from scratch and it's amazing and everyone's really proud of it. And I'm like, yeah, and so am I, but they'll be fine without me now. And that was kind of my mark of success. I'm ready to go and learn something else and challenge myself. in a new way.
Well, I think that's a massive mark of success when you can build succession and you can let the reins go with complete comfort.
Yes, definitely.
I haven't always had that. And so I'm a touch envious because I think that is success. And shelf life, I mean, what was it? It wasn't long ago they were saying out of the States 20 months for a CISO and the burnout rate and how do we change that? And within my broader division, my team at the moment, we've had to work through that because we run the only incident response capability within Vic government. And the tempo is higher than any of us would like. And so we have to deal with burnout at all levels with that. And it is a massive challenge. And succession is so important. And having the right people and having the ability to get people to switch off when they need to. And going back to even the simple things, like for me, it's about outcomes rather than time in front of your desk. And I know that sounds Mickey Mouse, but we still have to, as leaders, reinforce that.
Yeah.
And give people, permission to switch off almost and be overt about that.
I'm going to jump around. I was actually going to leave this more towards the end, but it's a nice segue given what we're talking about at the moment. And that is, this is the wellness and well-being aspect of working in cyber. You've talked just now about what you do for the people who work for you. But, at you as Dovid Clarke, how do you look after your own well-being in this kind of role?
I think to be transparent, I'm not nailing it at the moment. But that's also because, as we talked about before we started, what's the pipeline? What's the plan?
Yeah.
And for me, it's been about getting the right structure, getting the right leaders in my leadership team around me, so then I can take a breath. Yeah. And we're nearly there. And so I'm like, I can see the light. I hope it's not a train in the tunnel. And then I will be able to take a breath. I'll probably fall over at that point. But understanding that when you are bringing that level of organizational change, what the role as a leader and how much you can have with the coalition are willing. So I confess I'm not there yet. I'm on the steps because we've got some great people in there. But some of the differences around government is you have another layer of interest from your elected officials and just the ability to shield your team from some of that and be responsive. And one of our key VPS principles is responsive to the government of the day and really supporting their decision-making and what they're doing. And that takes an extra layer on top of the normal role of a CISO. So haven't nailed it, working on it. I think when I can, it is about simple things at home. It is about, cooking. My kids at primary school. My eldest is about to go into high school, which was one of the reasons that, really brought me back to Melbourne full time. So spending the time and watching them grow and watching my relationship as their age change and just the challenges that come with that. And being part of that, I think is very grounding and really good for me and just taking the time out. And I'm a enthusiastically mediocre handyman trying to renovate my very old house at the moment.
How humble.
So even this weekend, my dad will be in town. My parents have recently retired. They've been traveling around Australia, and I will be laying concrete with him as the labourer. So
amazing.
That's also good for you.
Yeah. And there's something important there in, admitting that, actually it's a bit hard at the moment. Yeah. Like I've been through those moments too. Over the last years, I know I've had some pretty dark times, because everything just seems to be happening at once, and you can't see that light that you hope is not a train at the end of the tunnel. And I think that giving yourself that permission to switch off and other people permission to switch off as well. Yeah,
just you keep on, and I do a lot of that. Particularly out if you're talking to the senior leader of a little entity that's just been popped. It's okay. We've been through this. We can help you.
Yeah, and
they're looking to you for that calmness and the guidance, and inside you're thinking, holy crap, and so I think there's a lot of that just endemic in our role. I was really fortunate at Sydney Airport. We had a service desk gentleman who had his identity stolen.
Yeah.
And he was quite affected by it, but he came in and he talked about it, and he was coming out the other end. So he said, can we, are you willing to talk about this? Can we make this a case study? Are you willing to? He said, I don't want this to happen to anyone else. This was horrible. And so to hear him talk about that experience gave others permission to report and add stuff to almost unlock that. There's no shame.
Yeah.
He was a smart guy.
Yeah.
So I think we need more of that.
I tell a story sometimes of how, like back in the early 2000s, I actually got halfway through almost giving up my PayPal credentials. And and this was way before my career had taken the path that it has now. But I say, hey, I've done it. And very early on in my career, I was distracted once. I was chatting to a friend who was cooking me dinner, and I'm scrolling through my email, and I clicked on the email phishing simulation. I can do it too, because I'm only human. I mean, let's hope I'm not doing it too much. But
and let's hope we have layers of controls. But I
exactly.
agree. I used to have a team that used to deliberately, they built a bluey one just to get me when my kids are very young.
Oh, really?
They got me.
Yeah.
They were very proud. But I agree. I think we need to model that. I mean, I got tripped up on one of those SMS scams years ago because I was expecting a package from overseas. And there's an import duty and you just click in a hurry and they're playing to that urgency, the desperation, and when you're distracted. I mean, these are the themes we talk about. I think one thing about this current role, it's taken me a lot back to those basics, which is good to come back to them at times. You get so caught up in the maturity levels and how you get to the particularly more mature organizations to come back to the fundamentals. Don't click on the link.
Yeah.
Use different password.
Yeah.
So that's actually been really positive. And to be part of that, and we're running campaigns to communities, as hopefully you've seen, around passwords. We're doing stuff for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, things like that. Just to come back to that fundamental stuff is really good.
And it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We're a few days into it at the time of recording. This episode will launch in time for it. What other initiatives are you and your team working on in government, or whether it be related to Cybersecurity Awareness Month or otherwise, and what do you think is there that industry can get excited about?
I think, just focusing on cybersecurity awareness, we're following some of the awareness coming out of the federal approach, which we really support, and giving it our own flavour and direction. So talking about the fundamentals, make sure you patch. Please use MFA if you can. Complicated passwords and learning how to see the signs of phishing and scams. And we see the risk of scams as well as a major thing. We work closely in collaboration with VicPol on that as well. We've actually built a little tool on the Service Vic app, if you get a chance, which is a great free app, to check your cyber safety and ask you a series of questions. I didn't get 100%. I've still got some work to do. Do you use MFA in all your accounts? Do you use different passwords on all your accounts? And some tips, and then gives you tips and tricks. Because we understand we're all at different points in our life when it comes to cyber. I have a capability engagement team, and they did some market research out across Victoria earlier this year, about 3,000 people, and really identified different segments of our community. We have different characteristics. I am the overconfident middle-aged man, as you probably gathered, but then we have some who are older and don't necessarily have that digital literacy, and then that links to cyber literacy, and how do we communicate with that? And so we're trying to build campaigns that have enough within our campaigns that can touch each of those and make sure the messaging will resonate. I mean, if you're if you're stereotypically, mid-20s lady, you've got a different risk profile from you for a mid-20s guy. Well, I remember being a mid-20 guy, so it wasn't a great.
If you pointed at me, then maybe I'm in my mid-20s. I am not, but but I appreciated the gesture.
But I think more broadly, and the one we talked about earlier, which I'm really proud of, is our approach to this whole talent space. So we've run one, we'll run one next year, and hopefully get it into a cyclical cyber interns program. One of the great things about our TAFE setup, Victoria particularly, but I know other states doing it as well, is we have a funded Cert 4 in cybersecurity. We took 5 out of that. We had 720 odd applicants, which was incredible. So going through that, of the 5, 4 have found employment within Victorian public sector, and 1 went back to do more study anyway. They didn't want to hang around.
Yeah.
And not all within my team. We've had people go out into other entities. And so to start that pathway, because I think we all get struck by there's not enough people in cyber. But we can't, and if you're working in government particularly, I can't buy them. I need to build them. And having that opportunity. And even if we only have them for a few years and then they broaden their career somewhere else, that's still a massive step forward. But that's only 5. And I know awesome work done by cyber companies and some of the big 4 as well around academies, and that collaboration with higher education is really positive. But we also need every organisation to have a think about bringing a junior on, or some way you can just move the needle one by one.
Yeah, and that shift in attitude and culture it's happening slowly. I don't know if it's happening as quickly as it should. I can remember taking on my first round of interns and grads at my previous role, and there was initially a bit of apprehension, in terms of are we ready to support them? And you do need to sort of check that, right? You can't just take on an intern and just have them sitting there reading and updating policies, unless that's what they want to do. But you need to
nurture that person really well, because there's not enough of those people around. But
yeah, exactly. In my experience, a lot of the really sort of smart SMEs in cyber, your pen testers, your threat intelligence officers, that kind of stuff, they like to sort of show people how smart they are. So for a junior to come in and for them to be a mentor is usually quite an empowering thing for an individual. They just may not have even realized that they were ready to be a mentor yet. But I agree with you. When we started taking on interns and grads, it became almost like an addiction for us.
Oh, good.
We were looking, as soon as the next year's grad program came up, we were on to HR. Well, how many can we had one last year, and that was a bit of a road test. How many can we get this year? And the team loved it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. It means you had the right support too. I agree. Yeah. I think you can't just throw an intern into an IT or a cyber team, because you need the support, you need the structure, you need smart people and know how to nurture them on the way too.
Yeah. What kind of projects do you sort of try to put them on to engage them, to make sure that they get a meaningful experience out of their time with you?
So we used a mix of approach. Firstly, it was that intro to government. And we had a team really focusing on them as a group, getting on there and getting them up to speed, because most of them had never worked in a corporate.
Yep.
We had some who were more mature age and a mix of people straight out of the class as well. So working on that, we had some who were really deeply enthusiastic about cyber, so we're using all the online stuff and the ethical hacking where they could, and others who are coming from more of a project background. So tailoring to extent, and then giving them direct mentors within each of the different teams. So some were hands-on in incident response, which was pretty amazing, seeing how they flourished. Others were leading project rollouts as well. And then we made sure we added some funded courses in there within government, and then without, using some of the awesome stuff like SANS, et cetera, and things as well. So make sure we were investing in their future when we could as part of that whole funding envelope.
I think to sort of people listening, if you haven't done this, then it's really something you've kind of got to reach out, speak to your HR teams about, your L&D teams. What relationships does your organization have with some of the unis or TAFEs? You particularly mentioned, I know that Cert 4 in cybersecurity at Victorian TAFE can be done as part of the free TAFE program.
It certainly is. It's funded by Victorian government.
Yeah. And in my experience, the students who are doing these courses, they are so keen to get out and find real work. Through AISA recently, someone asked me if I could sit down with a family friend who had just completed a cybersecurity course out at Swinburne. And he's like, I'm just applying, but everyone's looking for, 5 years experience, 6 years experience. You may need to stop putting those kind of entry requirements in some case, or at least allow yourself to think, this person may not have that all the skills and experience, but they've got that willingness to learn. And if you look into interns and grads, you could potentially, like you said, you could find someone that you want to take on full time. I know I did, but I also had people who came on for 8 weeks. And in that 8 weeks, they did an amazing time mapping out and updating some of our security architecture diagrams and some of the dependencies, which became valuable tools for us to use in the future. But then they also got a really good insight in terms of like what a good security stack could look like and how it all works. And they were so proud when they got to sit with me and the CTO and go, this is my work. And you get to be a part of that, forming that person's experience in the industry too.
Life. So I think it's important there's a balance. I think that's what we certainly are getting a lot of grads coming through, but how do we help them find that first step? I think there are also a couple of great initiatives out there that we're certainly big fans of, and hopefully you are, Australian Women in Security Network, bringing that up. Because I think if you look at who we are now, cyber compared to IT, people process tech, my team is sick of me talking about it's not an equilateral triangle, it's, isosceles. But the range of things, GRC, projects, pen testing, pure InfoSec policy, IR, blue team, purple team. I mean, the breadth is so much broader than we ever acknowledged before, which means the type of people we need is so much broader. And the need for diversity, particularly diversity of thought, is so much broader. So we love AWSN, we love Code Like a Girl. Anything that is just seeking people out and giving them opportunities they wouldn't normally get is fantastic. Of the 5 we took in those interns, 3 are neurodivergent.
Yep.
We built the whole program around that because we could, and realized everybody just wants to be treated like that.
Yeah.
And they blossomed.
And I hope that more people are sort of starting to see the power in knowing that, diversity in teams, diversity in thought, diversity in individuals who make up your group and your capability is incredibly rewarding and really, really powerful.
And I think makes you better.
Yeah.
You need that diversity of thought particularly, but the diversity of background and experience.
Yeah.
And whilst we are the remaining symptoms of that old boys club, we can still make a difference. And I hope we can. I try to. Reflecting, when I look in the mirror, I am a pale stale male. So,
Same.
But hopefully we can. together and as a community as more leaders come in from different backgrounds.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important to sort of recognize that, they're going, okay, cool. That's you can say that it was that way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a dirty thing. It is what it is, but as people will often say, well, do better. And I think a lot of us we're starting. Long way to go.
But I think we also, if you are at a point where you're doing better, we can help others who are just entering that. Well, how do I do better? And how do I harness other people's awesome work?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have to go it alone. You can, as we say, there are people out there already busting a gut.
Yeah.
Jackie at AWSN is happy to talk to you at any time. And the rest of it. And I admire the role you guys get to play at AISA around this, about being that connection point and highlighting these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been part of AISA for a few years now, and I encouraged even the young person I was talking to the other day about how to get involved in the industry. There are AISA and other bodies as well, membership or otherwise, that you can get involved in, that aren't, these ultra salesy closed door kind of things that can happen, where it literally is just about connecting people. When I first was made a CISO in 2019, I felt very isolated, very imposter syndrome when it first happened. And it was actually going to my first AISA CyberCon where I realized, well, no, this is massive, and there's lots of people who are just like me, who are struggling with the same things and actually validating some of my thinking. So, the little imposter devil on my shoulder got a little bit smaller that day.
And don't worry, we all have it. And still, at least once a month, I still get it.
Yeah.
How did I get here? And should I really be standing here? And take a deep breath. And
starting a new role in the last couple of weeks, right? It's in the lead up to it, and even in the first few days, it's like, all right, cool. Put on the mask, make sure no one finds out you're a fraud. Make sure they know they've made the right decision, even if you think they haven't. But I think a healthy awareness of that too, this is almost comes back to the well-being piece a little bit. Yeah, if you don't let your ego get in the way too much and sort of admit, you're not perfect, I think those of us in roles like ours, Dovid, we can sometimes, there is a inclination to want to have all the answers. And it's actually okay to not have all the answers. You can lean on other people in the industry who've been there before. You can lean on your partners, your vendors, groups like AISA, whatever it is. It's okay. And you can even put your hand up sometimes when you're speaking to a senior executive or whatever and be like, I'm not actually too sure, but there are some people we can talk to and some external expertise we can bring in on this.
I was fortunate through the military career that they're very clear. If you don't know, you say you don't know, but I'll come back to you and make sure you come back to them. And that's, I think, held me in good stead with that, having the courage to go, I don't actually know. Yeah. However, within 2 days, you will know because I will know and I will tell you. And that once you do that cycle the first time, the confidence in you grows because they realize you are imperfect, but you're working hard and you're not over promoting. You're not making promises you can't deliver on.
I imagine that culture and sort of hierarchical sort of teamwork structure within the military is quite different to working in corporate or even on the public service side of things.
Very different.
Do you feel you bring a lot of that culture into the way you operate?
My transition from military into corporate was rocky at the beginning because of not understanding and being it was a couple of decades ago, there wasn't really a well-worn path. I think we're getting better. I think we understand better as to the skills. I mean, if you think someone with that defense background, they have integrity, they're punctual, they do what they say, what they do, they're going to have polished shoes, which I still do, but
excellent.
They're going to have a level of ability to write. They're going to be able to take instruction and also respond to instruction. They're going to be respectful. These are all fundamental things that, whilst may make them look a bit different, are a great starting point you can build on. They're also coachable and teachable if they've had any success. And they're used to a bit of structure and wanting to know how they fit in the picture. But Australian corporate in particular hasn't necessarily understood that and finding those ways. But then, we've also seen defence particularly really leaned in on how people exit and how they support people on the way out when it's the right time. We've seen some successful people do really well after it. And then with that word of mouth helps a lot. I mean, I got a role in Telstra early on through a word of mouth through someone I'd worked with previously to apply for that. And then that kind of raised the bar again. So I think it's a lot of organic helps and paving the way for others, and then understanding the value you get in people like that, which is, we all bring different. It's that diversity once again. If I look at people out of enforcement, they bring another skill, which is awesome as well. People out of government, people out of private, people out of different sectors. And so we build the right team.
There's an importance there, I think, in what you're saying as well. It's about us respecting everyone's different background and experience too. But again, how that can create the makeup of a really, really fabulous team, especially in the security space. Whether you're dealing with people who, I personally came from a hospitality and retail background before I moved into IT and security operations. But if I may say, that oddly prepared me for some of the intensity. Because when you're working in a cafe at Sydney Airport on Boxing Day, making nearly 200 cups of coffee in 30 minutes, dealing with people shouting at you and needing everything done right now, you learn how to buckle down and get things done and work as a team because you have to, and how to prioritize and segment up your work to get it done.
And you also learn how not to drop a bit of snark in at the wrong time, which might come back and bite you later.
Yeah,
because you're on the thin edge.
Usually just to the other barista standing next to you on the coffee machine. But yeah, and that's what I mean. Everyone's experience is different, but you wouldn't think, okay, cool. We're talking about someone who has a military background versus someone who started out making coffee, but still you can sort of think of the stories there that form their work ethic and who they are and how they might approach and solve problems in this space as well. What is, and this is a question without notice, but it's one that I've been thinking of. What is the one thing that you know now that you wish you could go back and tell your former self about working in cyber? Like if you could go back, so you've been doing this for quite some time. If you go back to the beginning and say, "Hey, this bit of advice is really going to see you through," what would it be?
I think there's more than one, unfortunately. I think I think as a personality, for me, as I've aged and mellowed, that's helped. The probably more bitey reactions that you used to see a lot more, and that seeing that experience, that lived experience, as we talk about, has been really important. But I think the other one is one you touched on, that imposter, that I can ask for help and I can talk to others, and I'm not failing if I build the right structure around you. Because what we don't hear about is CEOs do that. Other people do it. So why wouldn't a CISO do that? Why wouldn't it be a senior manager information security who's really a CISO but can't get the title? Why wouldn't you do that? And I think that would be a key one, something I'd recommend for those in that first leadership role in cyber, be it a team leader, be it an unnamed CISO, be it someone building something. There's enough people, great people, giving people in the community who would help. I was fortunate that early on, probably partway through that first year of carrying it all myself, I had some great people just having good conversations and not being pushy about it, so I could kind of unwind a bit and accept that. And it meant to the point now that, I'm part of some of these communities and groups, and I'm trying to give back to them, particularly the ones that are there just for the community, and trying to give time to them so that others don't necessarily have to fall into that heap.
Yeah, I'd probably I try to sort of get a similar message across to a few people as well about the CISO role. I think culturally, especially maybe like over the last 5 to 10 years, we've created this particular image of what the CISO is. And that drives a lot of us when we get the title to feel like we have to be superhuman. Guess what? You just have to be human. And
Can't
that's
be
it.
superhuman.
Yeah.
And they don't expect you to be superhuman.
No.
We do that to ourselves.
Absolutely.
And every CISO role is different. I think that's where there's a challenge. There's some similarities in many other roles in there, whereas every organization is a little bit different. There'll be flavors, but there is just that nuance that means you've got to approach it just subtly different every time.
Absolutely. Dovid, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me on.
This week, I was very lucky to sit down and speak with Emily Wingard, the chair of AISA's South Australian branch, about the very recent and very successful Adelaide SEC event. Emily, welcome to Cyber Voices. How are you going?
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very well.
Now, I've been hearing amazing things about Adelaide Sec. I'm in Melbourne, and I'm almost feeling a little jealous that I didn't get to go. I see that there was over 770 delegates. You had 28 different amazing sponsors helping out, 25 different speakers, and one fun fact I even got that there was 319 flat white coffees served on the day. It sounds like it was a roaring success.
It was a great success, and I'm kind of glad that you're jealous. It means that you come along next year. Yeah, it was a really, really great day, really successful. It was such a really, really great day for our members.
I am long overdue for a visit back to Adelaide, so it'll be on my calendar next year for sure. Tell me though, what were some of the highlights of Adelaide Sec?
Well, I'll probably share a little bit first around its journey, because that probably shows the success of this year. So Adelaide Sec actually started in 2021, and it's grown ever since then. So we started off with a conference of 280 people to grow into 430 the next year, to 630 the following year, and like we mentioned, 731 this year. So it's been a really, really successful journey for our members. Really, really exciting, because one of the best things about Adelaide Sec is it's such a community-driven event, but also it's like almost, and I've heard this many times, it's like a reunion. So people get to come together and get to see each other, people that they don't often see all the time. So it's just such a great community to come together for Adelaide Sec. So just some of the overview of the day for this year. So we held it at the Convention Centre, which is a wonderful venue that overlooks the River Torrens, which was also a beautiful setting for the conference. We had the Treasurer of South Australia come and do our opening remarks and talk about the great things that are going on across our state. And then we had the National Deputy Cyber Coordinator as our keynote speaker for the morning. And he shared a lot of insights into the National Office for Cybersecurity, but also his time within the New South Wales government as well. And then we kind of split into 3 streams. So we had like an emerging theme stream, and then we had a cyber readiness stream, and we had a governance, risk and compliance stream, and some incredible speakers throughout those streams. And then our closing keynote was Mark Wales, and he focused a lot around his time in special forces, looking at how he stayed focused to drive his mission, support his team, but also focus on his self-care as well. So it was all about kind of driving high performance teams and individuals, which was a nice closeout for the conference. Another great thing that we had as part of the conference was an incident response competition. So something that, teams could get together and do a bit of like an incident response around the technical side, but also the media and executive and privacy and legal. So it kind of brought in different aspects as you'd go through dealing with a cyber incident. So we got to announce those at the conference as well, the winners of that competition. So that was run by Retrospect Labs. And the winners of that competition, so our number 1 winner was Department of Treasury and Finance in the South Australian government. And then our second was SA Power Networks, and third, CyberCX. And we were lucky enough to have SANS jump on board to provide the winning prize of SANS courses for the winning team. So that was really lovely to have them involved as well. And then the other thing we had at the end was a Hague's person chiseling chocolate for the members.
Hello, here we go. That sounds all right.
Something a little bit extra for our networking event. So that was a bit of fun.
I was going to ask as well, Emily, so what were some of your personal highlights, though, out of all of that?
I mean, it's very hard to nail them down, but I suppose definitely watching the vibe of the conference, like being able to see the community come together was pretty special. I look at it because I've seen the growth throughout the years, and just watching everyone just be really amped to be there. Like they treat each other like just such a supportive community, which is just really nice to see. So I think one of the biggest aspects for me is that I just love the sense of community that makes the day. Probably the other things that are really nice as part of our conference is just the high caliber of speakers that are coming through, which are really awesome to be able to share their insights and their knowledge with the community. but also probably just having that platform for those emerging leaders. So you're able to see those that are looking to get in the industry or are starting their career into the industry, looking to progress through their careers, are being able to have conversations with CISOs and leaders to work out, where they want to go in their careers. And that's pretty special too.
What else can AISA members expect coming up in South Australia between now and the end of the year? What else have you got in the pipeline?
So we've got a quiz night coming up in October. So that's a bit of fun. So that will be probably towards the middle of October. And then we've got a partnered event in November with Sec Talk, so a bit more of a technical themed talk and networking opportunity. And then we've got our annual general meeting in December and a bit of a closeout for the year, a bit of a celebration for the closeout of the year. And probably just a great one to mention as well is we now start our planning for International Women's Day, which is next March. And that's our second biggest event for the year. And so that will be held where we'll have either a lunch or a dinner or a breakfast even. We're still looking at how that might form, but it's a great opportunity for those to come along and hear from such a diverse range of leaders in both the industry but also outside the industry that have wonderful careers and journeys to share with our members and community.
That's fantastic. How can members and just the industry in South Australia in general get more involved with what the South Australian branch has coming up?
Yeah, so I think probably definitely jump on to our LinkedIn page. So that's AISA South Australia, because that certainly shows the next events that are coming up, but other things that are going on for the members. So we currently have 1,200 followers on LinkedIn, so jump on and check out what's going on. And then probably the other thing is to come along to our branch events. They're always a bit of fun. We always have some great speakers and members come along for just a great learning plus networking opportunity. And then also watch out for emails that are coming out, both for events across South Australia, but then of course the National CyberCon is coming up in November as well. And that's a really important one to come along because it's just such a huge, great event to be involved in. One thing I also wanted to touch on, if I could,
of course,
is the importance of the South Australian Branch Committee, because none of this would be possible without our incredible volunteers. And so I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Aaron Finnis, Shael Kumar, Nicole Moore, Trent McGee and Mitchell Green, who volunteer their time to create these incredible events and have input into how we can support the members' growth and opportunities. So, yeah, it's really important that they do an amazing job. So thanks to them.
Amazing. Thank you, team, for making such a great space and such a great atmosphere and such a great time for all of our members in South Australia. AISA is 100% built on the backs of incredible volunteers who give extraordinary amount of time. So that's so good to hear. And Emily, thank you so much for spending some time with me today and filling me in on all the wonderful things that are happening in SA.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cyber Voices. Our music is by Sanar Garut, and our show artwork is by Studio Quarantine. Please follow the show on your podcast platform of choice and leave a 5-star review. This will help others find the show. Please also follow the association on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you would like to add your voice to the show, have questions, feedback, or would like to be a sponsor, you can find out more by emailing cybervoices@aisa.org.au. Are you an AISA member? If not, you should consider joining our network of over 12,000 plus members across Australia. An AISA membership can open doors, build professional networks, create lifetime friendships, and offer exclusive training, events, and other perks. Become a member today by heading to our website at aisa.org.au. That's all for today. I hope you will join us again next time on Cyber Voices.